getting into acting is definitely something that many upon many wish to do. Now, some are never able to even get one audition. They toil away forever and ever, and then they just go off into the middle distance and wonder what could have been. Some achieve success, at least on the small screen, across either one big television program or numerous television programs, building a nice career, and then are able to rest on their laurels. And then it comes to the big screen where others are able to just build a very, very nice career, possibly get some award consideration, get numerous dollars, y'all, and are able to leave quite the lasting impression. And then there are others that may toil on the stage and may just have to build a career the old-fashioned way on television, multiple shows, and then get a big break on the big screen. And then they're able to build such a career that 6 decades later, people say, my God, what a talent Robert Duvall was. And Robert Duvall certainly is one of the most memorable actors of his time, perhaps of all time. A man that always carried himself with a quiet dignity or a fervor, whatever the role called for. Robert Duvall could do it all. He did it all. And in his 95 years on this earth, he left such a lasting impression. My word, you just look back on his filmography and realize Robert Duvall truly was one of the best. And this is my tribute to Robert Duvall. Please let me know your favorite Robert Duvall roles in the comments, please. And yeah, I'm doing this a little bit later. It's about 24 hours after Robert Duvall's passing. I was busy with work and a few other things and got around to it. Also, I wanted to compile some notes. I'm not going to go over every single role he did because look on IMDb. Look at the amount of roles that he did. I mean, it is astonishing just how busy he stayed, even into, his 80s and into his early 90s. Like, he went from literally To Kill a Mockingbird all the way to The Pale Blue Eye. That's a 60-year career trajectory, and that's just on the big screen. And he was still doing television. And, he was born on January 5th, 1931. Born to an amateur actress, Mildred Virginia, and William Howard Duvall, which, yeah, that kind of makes sense that Robert Duvall would have a man that sounds like he should be either a military man or a guy that wrote, British dramas, or a guy that was a constable back in the 18th century. William Howard Duvall. But he did, he being Robert, did get a degree in drama and then actually served in the military for a couple years. So, back then, that's what a lot of people did. I think if you look back at a lot of actors, a lot of professional wrestlers, a lot of professional athletes, a lot of people were doing that in the 40s and into the 50s. And stage acting basically became a way of life for him. He even shared an apartment with Dustin Hoffman. I hope they had children's furniture for that. And both actually had a friendship early on with another young struggling actor, Gene Hackman. May Gene Hackman rest in peace. Terrible what happened to him and his wife. But he left quite the legacy. And being cast in The Midnight Caller certainly helped because that was by Howard Foote, and Howard Foote, and by the way, just saying that right there, To Kill a Mockingbird. And there are people that will remember that he was Boo Radley. There are people that will not remember he was Boo Radley. It depends on A, how old you are, and B, how good your memory is. I need to go back and rewatch this actually at some point. I think I did a video on this a number of years ago. I'm not doing self-promotion, but this is truly one of my favorite movies of all time. It's not in my top 4, but it's certainly Gregory Peck, but Robert Duvall shined so much in the role of Boo Radley, which is actually amazing considering the character. So, he really just he shined here, and it was off to the races from there. He would do TV stuff starting in 1960, various series like Naked City, Route 66, Twilight Zone. He was Charlie Parks. Trying to remember what specific episode that was, but I do remember it's like you have him, you have Robert Redford, so many others that were, getting breaks and looking back on what they did on television. It's just incredible to see the ascent that they had. And, you know, just so many other shows, like, you know, the Outer Limits, We Control the Horizontal and the Vertical, The Fugitive. You know, The Fugitive is like one of those where it's like they've always, like, besides the Harrison Ford movie, they always tried to recapture the magic and it never worked. The Wild Wild West, the series, not the movie, and the Mod Squad and so on. But the movie roles, yes, To Kill a Mockingbird, Boo Radley, like, just great. Start right there. And had he stopped, say, after the 80s, Robert Duvall still would have had one of the best careers. He still would have. Because I'm going to go over why and everything before we even get to, like, you know, the 90s. So he was Captain Newman, MD, in, or he was in Captain Newman, MD, rather. I wrote this a little bit weird in 1963. He was in The Chase as Edward Stewart. That was in 1966. He was in Bullitt. He was a cab driver. Bullitt is another one I need to revisit. Some Bullitt, just great car chases, all that. But, you know, 1969, so already he's building up a reputation here. He was in True Grit. That was one of John Wayne's probably last great westerns, because John Wayne, I believe, lived to 75, 76. But I would say True Grit was probably the apex. And MASH, he was Major Burns. Excellent. In 1970, and that MASH was a movie, by the way, before it became an iconic television series. Some people know that, some people don't. But then again, it's all about age. And THX 1138, not THX, the audience is listening. Turn it up! Turn it up! But anyway, 1971, he was in The Godfather and Godfather Part 2 as Tom Hagen. And I believe even his voice was provided for the Godfather video games, if I recall correctly. He was in Tomorrow, that was 1972. He was in The Outfit. Yes, same type. 1973. That's one I also need to revisit. I need to revisit a lot of Robert Duvall stuff. But, you know, again, Network. I mean, Network's like one of the most anxiety-inducing movies of, I would say, at least of the 70s, possibly of all time, just with the pacing of it. But Robert Duvall was definitely up to the task there. The Eagle Has Landed in 1976. Apocalypse Now in 1979. That's a movie where, boy, fraught with issues as far as the shoot and stuff like that and what people went through. But what a military movie. What a dissection of the human spirit and the distilled spirits that many humans had to drink to deal with that. But the great Santini, that was 1979. And then we go to The Natural, 1984, so skipping over a few things right here. Because The Natural, Robert Redford, Robert Redford being one of the best actors, like, of his generation, possibly of all time. Colors in 1988, so right there, you could argue that a great career, maybe not the greatest career of all time, but definitely one of the greatest careers, just with that amount there. That's just me mentioning some of the high spots, not even all the high spots. Days of Thunder, yes, he even got to be in, like, some well-received box office stuff. 1990, Newsies in 1992, Falling Down 1993, which was critically acclaimed, The Paper in 1994, A Family Thing in 1996. That's one I remember being kind of sad, a little funny, but a little sad. Phenomenon, was in 1996, Sling Blade. So yeah, he was in three things that came out in 1996. Family Thing, Phenomenon, Sling Blade. The Apostle, 1997. I do remember seeing ads for that. Deep Impact, speaking of box office stuff. He was in that in 1998. And, he's just rolling along at this point. You got to think about it. Born 31, we're getting to 1998. He's almost 70. And he's doing, great stuff. Still carrying himself with such grace, carrying himself with such, class. A civil action. I'm talking about him on screen. He never came across bad in interviews and everything. I don't know about necessarily certain beliefs and stuff like that, but I'm not here to talk about that. A civil action. That was, I believe, back when John Travolta was taken somewhat seriously as an actor before Battlefield Earth came around. Gone in 60 Seconds. Questionable that he would be in that, but whatever. Robert Duvall, not John Travolta. But John Travolta's co-star from Face Off was in that, a.k.a. Nicolas Cage. The Sixth Day in 2000, I forgot that he was in that. It's been a bit since I've seen some of these movies. John Q. Yeah, John Q is a little bit depressing. It's also a little bit ridiculous, but whatever. And Gods and Generals, I believe that was the one that Ted Turner funded, and it was like almost a 4-hour like Civil War epic thing, and it bombed at the box office. At least it bombed at the theater I was at, because, and that wasn't Robert Duvall's fault. It wasn't even the cast's fault, but it's like, we would go into shows for that, like at the theater I worked at, and just doing theater checks, and it's just astonishing looking at the fact that like there was barely anybody there. And the thing is whether they put, I don't remember if they put an intermission in or not. Even if they did, like there were some people that were so bored they didn't come back. But Gods in General, I mean, hey, Robert Duvall laying his star power to it. It's just a shame it was just such a box office bomb. Open Range, not to be confused with the animated movie. He was in a lot of westerns. In his older days. Secondhand Lions, I do recall that one. I worked at the theater when that one came out. Kicking and Screaming. He also had a brief role in Thank You for Smoking. We Own the Night in 2007. Four Christmases in 2008, I believe. And then Crazy Heart, that was 2009. He was in The Judge in 2014. Then he was in The Pale Blue Eye in 2022. But you just look at all those roles. I mean, you just look at what he did in the 60s and 70s. And even into like the, even into the early 2000s. The amazing variety that he had. And he always stayed true to himself. But I mean, it's like he would always carry himself with such, like panache and stuff like that. He would always have such a way of carrying himself to like you felt like he could be your kindly old uncle or grandpa talking to you. And I think that was the thing that he really was able to build on even in his later years. And unfortunately, The Pale Blue Eye did come out a few years ago. And that was the last role he was in. But my God, I mean, at that point, he was 91 years old when that movie came out. He obviously had health issues, as anybody that's nearing 100 would. And he was still able to have a hell of a goddamn career. So, bottom line is, Robert Duvall, one of the best. Truly one of the best, and he will be sorely missed. And in closing, also, I do want to mention, as I'm recording this, the news came out about Jesse Jackson, civil rights activist, and stuff like that. I'm not going to get into a long, detailed thing about Jesse Jackson. I feel that's better suited for others to talk about that are more in tune with what he did, if it moved them in one direction or another. But I did want to mention that here at the end. But yeah, rest in peace, Jesse Jackson. Rest in peace, Robert Duvall. And it's getting a little eerie that so many actors that many around my age, I'm 45, watched from an early age, and seeing how old they are now as they pass. Like, when Robert Redford passed, he was in his late 80s, early 90s. Gene Hackman had not worked in a number of years, I think almost 15, 20 years, because he had done more than enough. A lot of these actors, a lot of these actresses, they're aging out, folks, and we got people coming in that are, they're really good and everything, but Hollywood's changing. That's another story for another day. But Robert Duvall really did mention a lot of, Robert Duvall really did, set up a career where he could be considered a tentpole, like of how you should carry yourself, how you should conduct yourself throughout your career. So rest in peace, Robert Duvall. Leave your favorite Robert Duvall moments in the comments, but rest in peace, General. Rest in peace, sir. Left a hell of a career.